Imagine a courtroom not of this earth, but suspended in eternity itself. There are no stone walls, no wooden gavel, striking order, only radiant light trembling like the sound of 1,000 harps. Thrones stretch beyond sight, and at the center sits the Creator. His gaze burns with both love and justice, a fire no angel can endure without trembling. Before him kneels Sariel. Once resplendent, now his wings are frayed, dulled by the dust of rebellion. Every other angel who had stood in that place was cast away forever, chained in darkness until the final day. But Sariel was different. He would become the only one in the history of heaven and earth to receive mercy. Why him? What set him apart? If there was mercy for an angel, what might it mean for humanity? Before the first dawn painted Eden in gold, before the heartbeat of man echoed on the earth, there existed the council of the Watchers. They were neither warriors like Michael, nor heralds like Gabriel, but guardians, silent keepers of God's design. Among them was Sariel. He was not the loudest, nor the strongest, but in his eyes lingered a quiet depth, as though he saw beyond the horizon of time itself. The Creator entrusted him with two great tasks. First, to oversee the moon, marking its cycles so that time would flow as heaven decreed. Second, to watch over the spirits of humanity, not their flesh, but the unseen flame within them. His duty was to guard without interfering, to guide without revealing himself. From the edge of heaven, Sariel gazed down upon the world. He saw Adam and Eve walking hand in hand through forests alive with beauty. He heard children laughing in rivers, untainted by fear. He watched men chip stone into the first crude tools. He marked the seasons, the warmth of summer, the whisper of autumn, the hush of snow. Each time the moon completed its course, he recorded it with patience, knowing wisdom would grow in God's perfect time. Yet something stirred in him that many angels could not understand. Compassion. Sariel did not merely see mortals as figures within a grand design. He saw their frailty. He felt their hunger, their sudden illnesses, their stumbling steps into danger. Some watchers looked with cold detachment, others with dangerous fascination. But Sariel's heart softened, and then came the whispers. Why remain distant? Why guard from afar when they could walk among men and teach them directly? We have knowledge that could heal, that could protect, some murmured. Why keep it hidden? Sariel resisted at first. Remembered the command. Do not cross the boundary between heaven and earth unless sent. For divine knowledge is like fire placed in season. It gives warmth and life. Given too soon, it consumes and destroys. But one night, though heaven knows no night, he looked down and saw a mother cradling her fevered child, whispering prayers into the darkness. Sariel's chest ached. He knew the cure. A plant grew nearby, its leaves able to drive out the sickness. It was simple, it was within reach, yet it was forbidden. And for the first time, Sariel questioned the law. A single crack opened in the wall of obedience, and through it would pour a flood. High above the clouds stood Mount Hermon, its snowy peak piercing the sky like a spear toward heaven. It was there on that summit where earth seemed to brush against eternity that the watchers gathered. 200 in number, their forms burned like living stars against the night. Sariel stood among them, his heart divided between loyalty to the Creator and compassion for the fragile children of earth. At their head was Shemihaza, a leader whose voice rumbled like distant thunder. Brothers, he proclaimed, you have seen their pain, you have watched them stumble in darkness, and yet we remain silent in the halls of heaven. But what if we did more? What if we walked among them not as shadows in the sky, but as men of flesh and blood? We could guide them, could protect them. Why should wisdom remain hidden when it could save their lives? A murmur spread among the watchers. Some nodded eagerly, others hesitated in dread. They all knew the command, do not descend unless sent. They all knew the cost of disobedience. But Shemihaza pressed harder. If we act together, there is no turning back. Let us swear an oath. If one falls, we all fall. If one is punished, we all share the sentence. Stand with me, and let us bind ourselves to this cause. The oath was sealed under the stars. And Sariel, though his heart trembled, did not walk away. That night they fell from heaven like a storm of blazing meteors. Farmers and shepherds saw the sky ignite and ran to the mountain in terror and awe. And there stood the watchers, no longer spirits unseen, but men with eyes that burned like the core of fire. The people did not flee. They reached out with reverence, believing heaven itself had drawn near. Suriel knelt in the dust, for the first time breathing the scent of earth. He touched the soil with his hand, feeling its weight. Then he began to teach. He showed them how the phases of the moon could mark the seasons, when to plant and when to harvest. He showed mothers how to brew leaves into teas that healed fever and eased pain. In the evening, he sat beside their fires, telling the stories of the constellations above. At first, it seemed like a gift of pure blessing. But not all knowledge shared was good. Some watchers revealed the secrets of forging iron, teaching men how to hammer blades sharper than stone. Others whispered darker arts, sorcery, enchantments, charms to bend human hearts. The innocence of mankind began to unravel. Sariel, who had come with compassion, saw what they had unleashed. One night he watched two men clash, steel blades glinting with a knowledge never meant for them. Blood soaked the ground. And the victor did not grieve, he lifted his head in pride. In that moment, Sariel's chest grew cold. He thought of the child whose fever he had healed. He thought of the grateful villagers who had learned to read the stars. And now he saw blood spilled with tools born of heavenly secrets. What had he done? The voice came suddenly, not through ears but through the marrow of his bones. Sariel. He knew at once whose voice it was, the Creator himself. What have you done? The words pressed on him like the weight of worlds. For the first time in his eternal life, Sariel felt fear. The night of judgment came swiftly. The heavens cracked open above Mount Hermon like glass shattering across the sky. The wind died. Birds fell silent. Even the insects stilled, as if creation itself held its breath. Then came the light, not the gentle glow of moonrise that Sariel cherished, but a radiance that pierced bone and spirit alike. They were seized by beings of fire and wind, angels unfallen and unshaken. The watchers resisted. Some fought, faces twisted with rage. Others cried out that their actions had been noble, that God was unjust to condemn them. But Sariel lowered his head, silent, as visions of humanity flooded his mind, the healed child, the thankful farmers, and then the warriors drenched in blood. Had he given them life? Or had he opened the door to their destruction? The summons came like thunder splitting the heavens. The sky above Mount Hermon fractured like glass, shards of radiance scattering across the night. The wind ceased. Birds vanished into silence. Even the insects hid, as though creation itself had drawn in a single breath and dared not release it. Then the light descended, not the silver glow of moonrise that Sariel loved, but a brilliance that pierced to the marrow. It was the radiance of judgment. The watchers were seized not by human hands, but by beings of fire and wind, unfallen and unshaken. Some of Sariel's brothers fought, their faces twisted with fury. Others shouted defiantly that their deeds had been noble, that God was unjust to punish them. But Sariel did not resist. He bowed his head, and the faces of humanity flashed through his mind the child he had healed. The farmers he had guided, the men who had forged blades, and the blood that stained the soil. Had he saved them, or had he armed them for their own ruin? They were dragged into the throne room of heaven, a space vast beyond imagination. Stars burned like torches upon its edges, and the floor was glass reflecting infinite light. At the center stood the throne, the meeting place of justice and mercy. Michael on one side, Gabriel on the other, their faces solemn. The Creator's voice filled the chamber. It was not thunder, it was not whisper, it was everything. You were given a place among the holy. You were trusted to watch over my children, yet you descended, you defied. A murmur rose from the watchers' protests, excuses, defiance. But one word silenced them, silence, and the universe obeyed. The judgment was swift. Every watcher who descended would be bound in chains beneath the mountains, in a place where no light could reach, until the day of final reckoning. No appeal, no second chance. One by one, angels of fire stepped forward, binding them in chains of living light. These chains did not merely wrap their limbs, they cut into their very spirits, severing the constant song of heaven. Sariel felt it like the tear ring of his soul. The presence of God, that hum of divine communion that had always filled him, was suddenly gone. In the emptiness, he understood what hell truly was. Not flame, not darkness, but separation from the one who gives life. Many watchers spat curses, their voices dripping with bitterness. Others plotted vengeance, eyes burning with pride. But Sariel did something no fallen one had ever done in that place. Wept not for himself, but for the harm he had wrought upon the earth. And he whispered, almost too faintly for the court to hear, "Lord, I am sorry." No such words had ever been spoken from that pit of rebellion. They were cast into the depths, into caverns beneath the mountains, where no light shone. For most, the chains were an end. They sank into despair, twisting into bitterness, their souls darkening beyond recognition. But for Sariel, the chains became a crucible. In silence, stripped of glory, he began to pray. He did not pray for release. He did not ask to regain his place among the holy. He prayed for forgiveness, prayed for the humans he had once guided, that they might keep what was good and reject what was evil. He prayed even for his brothers who mocked him, that they might one day see the truth. And above all, he prayed that if God ever granted him the smallest chance to serve again, he would take it even if his name was never remembered. Time in that abyss could not be measured. There were no days, no moons to mark their cycles. His very role had been stripped away. The others counted ages in bitterness. Sariel counted his in prayer. And it was there, in the silence of exile, that something new began. In that abyss where time had no measure, Sariel prayed. His voice was not heard by men, nor echoed in the courts of heaven, yet it stirred the silence itself. And then, like the first fragrance of rain carried on the wind, something shifted. First it was faint, like a memory. Then it grew. Presence filled the pit, warm and alive. Sariel lifted his head, his heart trembling. Sariel. The voice was not thunder now, not judgment crashing down, but soft, like a hand extended. Rise. The chains that had burned him for ages began to hum with golden light. Not the blinding fire of wrath, but a glow tender and steady. The other fallen ones stared in horror. "What is this?" they hissed. "Why him?" they demanded. Sariel did not know why. He dared not ask. He only whispered, "Thank you," and then he was gone from the pit. He stood once more in the heavenly court, but it was different now. Before he had walked there clothed in glory, belonging. Now he stood stripped bare, humbled, dependent only on mercy. He bowed so low his forehead touched the glass-like floor. The Creator's voice filled the expanse. "Sariel, do you know why you are here?" "No, Lord," Sariel answered. "Only that you have called, and I am here. I have seen your heart in the darkness," the voice said. "You grieve not for your loss of glory, but for your sin. You sought not your own name, but my mercy." The pause that followed felt like the whole universe leaning in to listen. "Rise, Sariel, your chains are broken. I am sending you again." Sariel trembled. "Lord, am I worthy?"
No.
The Creator replied simply, "But my mercy makes you so." He was given a new commission. It's no longer a watcher who revealed mysteries not yet meant for men. Now, he would serve as a guide to human souls, a healer for the wounded, a guardian to those walking through the valley of shadows. Some traditions whisper this was the moment Sariel joined Raphael in the ministry of healing. Others say he was restored to the moon, not to unveil forbidden secrets, but to quietly keep the rhythm of creation. Whatever the title, one truth was unshakable. Sariel was the first and only fallen angel ever restored. News swept through heaven like fire. Some angels rejoiced, celebrating his return. Others stood in silence, troubled, whispering, "Why him? Why not the others? Could mercy reach anyone?" Michael, commander of hosts, spoke plainly. "No, mercy is not given to all. It is given to the one who repents." And only Sariel repented. When his eyes opened again, Sariel was not in heaven but on earth. A quiet valley stretched before him, silvered by moonlight. The air was cool, carrying the scent of cedar and wild flowers. A shepherd sang softly to his flock in the distance. For a long moment, Sariel stood still, listening to the earth breathe. He had returned, but not as he once had. The first time he walked the earth, he fell like a blazing star, brilliant and terrifying, surrounded by awe. This time he came quietly, unseen, like a shadow passing through the night. This was no mission for spectacle. It was a mission to serve. At the edge of a village, he found a boy lying in the dust, his skin pale, breath shallow. A mother knelt beside him with a cracked cup of water. Her eyes were desperate. Ariel knelt opposite her. To her, he was just a weary traveler with kind eyes. "What happened to your son?" he asked. "The fever came 3 days ago," she whispered. "I prayed, but the herbs I once knew have been forgotten." Suriel's chest tightened. Once he had given men too much knowledge too soon. Now in fear they had cast away even what was good. But this time, he did not break the boundary. He did not reveal a secret. He simply placed his hand on the boy's forehead and prayed. The Creator's mercy flowed like a river. The boy's breath deepened. Color returned to his cheeks. The mother's eyes filled with tears as she clutched him close. "Who are you?" she asked. Sariel smiled faintly. "A friend, nothing more." And before she could thank him, he was gone. This became his way. Sariel walked from village to village unseen, tended the sick, guided the lost, whispered courage into hearts broken by despair. At times he worked through dreams, planting visions of hope. At times he walked beside the lonely, his presence felt, but never revealed. One night he stood in a field gazing at the full moon. Once it had been his assignment, the great timekeeper of heaven. Now it was something more. A reminder. The moon does not shine with its own light. It reflects the sun, and so did he. He had no light of his own, only what the Creator allowed to shine through him. Then a voice broke the night. Deep, familiar, cold. "You don't belong here." Sariel turned. A figure loomed a watcher, still chained in bitterness, roaming in spirit to corrupt. His eyes burned with pride. "Do you think your service makes you one of them again? You're still one of us? You fell?" Sariel's voice was calm. "Yes, I fell. But I asked for mercy, and he gave it. Mercy is weakness," the fallen one spat. "No," Sariel answered, stepping closer. "Mercy is strength you will never understand." The figure shrank back, vanishing into the darkness, unable to endure the light Sariel carried. Far to the north, in a land blanketed by winter, there lay a village where faith had died. The people no longer prayed. They no longer trusted one another. Violence and suspicion had become their daily bread. Laughter was gone. Doors slammed against strangers. Kindness was a memory. But in that village lived one child, an 8-year-old girl, orphaned, left in the care of strangers, who saw her as nothing more than another mouth to feed. Yet each night, before she closed her eyes, she whispered a prayer into the darkness. "God, if you hear me, please, send someone." The Creator heard her, and he sent Sariel. He did not arrive in thunder or fire. He did not appear blazing with wings of light. He came as a quiet traveler, unseen in his true form, carried no sword, wore no crown, but his presence moved like the hush of falling snow. At first, he helped in small ways. A broken roof mended overnight. Water carried from the frozen river left by a stranger's hand. Firewood stacked by the door before dawn. The villagers noticed, and though they grumbled, some felt a spark of gratitude they could not name. For the girl, Sariel became more than a helper. He became a friend. He told her stories, not heavenly secrets, but parables woven with truth about love, forgiveness, and courage. He showed her kindness not as a command, but as a way of life. And slowly, her faith grew stronger. Something unexpected began to happen. Her light spread. A neighbor helped her in return. Another offered a smile, a shared meal. Like ice cracking in spring, the village began to thaw. But one night, disaster struck. Fire broke out in a hut, and the wind caught it, whipping flames from roof to roof. Panic spread. The villagers tried to fight it, but the fire consumed everything in its path. And then came the cry. The girl was trapped inside. Sariel moved faster than thought, plunged through the smoke, the flames curling around him. He found her huddled in a corner, coughing, eyes wide with fear. Wrapping her in his arms, he shielded her body with his own and carried her out into the snow. She gasped for air, her small hands clutching his cloak. For a moment, through the veil of smoke, she saw him as he truly was. Her eyes widened. "You're an angel." Sariel smiled gently. "No, I am only someone God forgave." And before she could speak again, he vanished into the night. The voice came soon after, strong and clear. "It is finished." Sariel felt the pull, not the downward drag of chains, but the upward call of home. When his eyes opened again, he stood before the throne, but this time there was no fear. "Well done, Sariel," the Creator said. "You were faithful in small things. You guarded not with power, but with love. And so your place is secure." The halls of heaven blazed with light as Sariel took his place among the redeemed, not because he had never fallen, but because he had been lifted up by mercy. And here lies the meaning of his story. It is not only about an angel, it is about us. For each of us has crossed lines we should not have stood in places we did not belong. The enemy would have us believe it is too late, but Sariel's life declares otherwise. It is never too late to turn back. If mercy can reach a fallen angel, then mercy can reach you. So hold this story close. Carry it into your own darkness. Share it with someone who needs to hear that forgiveness is still possible, because the light of mercy still shines in even the faint reflection. Like the glow of the moon is enough to lead us safely through the night.